Good evening. Welcome to the March Forest History Association of Wisconsin's webinar. Tonight we have the good fortune of having Dale Heikkinen here to talk about the Heikkinen Machine Company and the story behind the Prentice Hydraulic Loader. Prentice Hydraulics had its beginnings back in 1945 in the Heikkinen Machine Shop near the village of Prentice. Leo Heikkinen repaired and welded heavy equipment, fabricated steel, and manufactured mechanical jammers there. And to meet the needs of his customers, he started to do some special design innovations on their jammers. These improvements gradually got the attention of others, and soon requests were coming in for other custom-built jammers. The continued improvements and modifications eventually led to the development of the Prentice Hydraulic Loader. Our speaker tonight is Leo Heikkinen's son, Dale. He has an extensive collection of Heikkinen Machine Company and Prentice Hydraulic Loaders historical documents. The collection also documents his father's second company, the hydraulic fuel wood processing machinery. In his spare time, Dale enjoys refurbishing logging machinery and equipment that his father had built. He's a member of the Wisconsin Historical Society, the Price County Historical Society, the Knox Creek Heritage Center, the Jump River Valley Historical Society, and of course, the Forest History Association of Wisconsin. Before I turn this over to Dale, there's a couple things just for housekeeping. If you have questions tonight, we will take the questions. You can type them anytime during the presentation into the chat feature. And at the end of the presentation, the moderators, Tom, Giroux, and I will relay those questions to Dale. If you should happen to have any problems with the webinar itself, you can enter those questions or comments into the chat feature also, and Tom and I will try to help you out the best we can via chat. So with that, for tonight, I'm going to turn this over to Dale, and welcome, Dale.
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Dale Heikkinen, and I grew up literally with plant number 1, plant number 2, and plant number 3. So I've been through it from A to Z. But my dad, obviously, his parents and my mom's parents both were from Finland, and they were born and raised in Brantwood, Clifford area. And my dad learned a lot about repairing and building things in his dad's blacksmith shop. But my mom and dad were married in 41 and moved to Milwaukee during the World War II. And my dad learned his machine shop and was able to advance from there. And my dad's father had a logging operation in Brantwood. That was their first set of horses there. In Brantwood, there's crews, which there's a lot, some of these are my relatives, had their logging operation. They worked a lot together, logging the Brantwood, Clifford area. Prentice, just east of Prentice, about 6 miles, there was a L'Enfant landing where the Minneapolis-Sault Ste. Marie Railroad ran by, and they were using a steam jammer on that. There's still the trackage gone, but the siding is still there where they used to load logs out of that area there. And then this is in Brantwood. They had another logging yard there, but they're using a horse cross-haul loading with the cable, not steam powered, and loading the railroad cars. Then my dad's dad, he had his first pulp truck, and he had his logging camp set up in Brantwood again. He did a lot of logging in that area, in the Brantwood, Clifford area. And this is one of the first, the A-frame jammer, like you saw on the steam loader, and then the railroad car. They were able to load off of the back end of a truck with a jammer and load the cable, wrapping it around the wood. And they loaded wood that way. And of course, hydraulics wasn't out yet. This is another one of my uncle's and my dad's trucks that they were hauling wood, a 6-cylinder, single axle, no brakes in the trailer, but they were pretty good load of pulpwood back in the day. And this is my mom's brother's logging operation in Brantwood also. And you can kind of see that little cable jammer wood went back in the ground there, and they use that a lot in the woods for loading wood. And then this is one of their logging trucks, same thing, 6-cylinder, no brakes on the trailer. but they were able to haul. That's a nice load of wood to haul compared to those loads that they haul now with 500 horsepower. And my dad's brothers also had a sawmill that they made in Brantwood that they sawed a lot of their lumber. And they sold a lot of wood that way. When in 45, then my dad, of course, with his brothers were involved in logging, and he was working, learning his experience, trade, welding and machining in Milwaukee. They talked him into coming back up to Prentice. And he didn't want to leave down there during the war. He said, I'm making 33 cents an hour, but his brothers had that construction equipment. They said, you come up here, we'll give you all the work you want. So they purchased a building called the Palace Dairy. It was an old creamery with a lot of room and a lot of electrical power. And my dad started moving equipment in there. And he also didn't have the equipment set up with like the individual clutch and transmission out. They used what they called a line shaft. You can see the belt hanging from the ceiling there. But then they lined up the machines to run, and then they switched the belt from a bigger diameter pulley to another one to be able to speed up or slow down the speed of the machine. And there is his lathe. You can see the belt in front of him there running his lathe. That was in his first shop in just kind of west of Prentice. You can see another shot of one of his first jammers, 47. He used a Model A rear end to run the Plymouth rear end off the engine, and then Model A rear end, he cut one short and welded a drum for the cable to come up. And but that in the 47, $347, I would imagine that's probably pretty good money back in those days. Then to supplement the income, there was no chainsaws in the area, and they were just coming out. So he took on the McCullough chainsaw dealership to help supplement income. He also, his brothers then had construction equipment. They had a Bessier series crane. And if you notice that grapple, he built special grapples for them because they ended up had a contract. They had a construction company, my uncles in Tomahawk Timber was able to get the contract to Ely, Minnesota. And I think it was like 20 to 25 winters. They ended up logging up at, it was close to Ely. It was called Forest Center. But then they loaded the railroad cars up there with that crane. But Dad built these special grapples for them to be able to load the cars efficiently. And also they went in the woods a lot of times and they picked up bundles from the cutters, in the woods there. But that was one of his starts. Now here you can actually see that same grapple, working with loading their trucks. They had a lot of these Fords. I think they had 12, 15 of these trucks working up there. They had Diamond T's. They had a lot of Diamond T's up there too. And I think that's a Shield Bantam 22B, I think. And you can see the grapple, and then they swung it, the bundle off the truck into the railroad car, and then it would head to Tomahawk to the mill, to the Tomahawk paper. You can see the cutaway on the drum here. Now this is the Model A rear end, and you can see the drum that he built there. But this is the Plymouth one that run off the power takeoff off the truck, and then you kind of see it here mounted on a truck. But he started running he was getting all these out of the junkyard to start with because he didn't know how else to do it. So he had to start thinking and designing a special winch, and he got to that later. But you can see here, this is my dad's brother's employee. And again, Leo Hydraulics at that time, they had to wrap the bundle of wood with cable, and then he had to unwrap the bundle in the truck. So before hydraulics got involved, that's kind of how they did that. And here you can see they had, this is my uncle's truck with the single axle. This is Ford's here now, loading pulpwood in Wisconsin. Now this is a tandem. Now it's getting a little beefier truck in a GMC, but he started doing more of that. And you can see another, looks like a Chevy right behind there. And this is actually my parents, when they moved up here, they were renting a house and they had to build a house. So they built the house right next to the plant. So that's the house that we grew up in, just west of Prentice. And here, this one here is mounted on a Ford. You can kind of see the drum and the rear end mounted there, going up to the cable drum. Now this is Haas Brothers Lumber Company in Ogama, but you can see single tong to grab a single log. But that's how they did it back in the day. And he had to, if you notice, he got his hand on a cable to once he pulled on it, of course, set the brake drum on it so it would start pulling and then would pull the log up and then they just release it to drop it back on. It actually worked pretty good. And this is my dad's brother here, wrapping the bundle of woods. And again, you can see he's hanging onto the cable. The same thing, he had a winch set up on the back there to run the cable, and they used this a lot. I mean, a lot of loggers actually did a lot of hauling with these, loading with these cable winch drums. My dad finally come out with, in the 50s, early 50s, with the actual hydraulic loader. And now you could actually grab the bundle of wood with a hydraulic clam. You see the hoses hanging down here. And then he actually operated off the front, and his feet ran the levers for the swing. And he didn't have no seat on the first models there. He said that was a $5 option if he put a seat on there. So, but it's all evolution. It all started, this way. And then here you can see the same prototype, the new loader. And he also had a telescopic boom on there too to lengthen it out, but just strictly a A-frame jammer. And anybody uses a cable swing on it off the front here. Now here's that you can see that cable hydraulic cylinders operating to swing it. But now you notice he put the $5 seat on there, and you can see his feet down here where the levers are to be able to swing the loader. But these gentlemen, he would come in, and when he first started promoting, a lot of the old timers, they were just used to the cable machines. But I don't know if everybody can remember, the depots all had the loading docks where the guys would drive their truck on there because they didn't have no loader or unloader. And they used the picaroon to drag log by log or pulp stick by pulp stick to drop it into the railroad car. Well, Dad would go park by the depot. When a company come in there with their truck, he told them, "Don't you go on the dock. I'll go up there myself with my jammer. You guys stay down below. I'll grab your wood off of your truck and I'll swing it around and I'll put it in the railroad car." And he says it didn't take him long to figure out this is a lot easier. And he did a lot of demonstrating that way, and people realized that how much faster the hydraulics were and how much easier it was to load the railroad cars. And he sold a lot of loaders that way and get started. Now here he come up with his patented winch because he couldn't get any Model A rear end winches anymore, but he started building them this way, and it actually worked very well for the hull haulers. And here's another one, and he got a little bit more advanced as the time went on, a little more rugged, and you can kind of see how beefy this is, for loading wood. Now this is his second plant now. This is along the river, and it's you can see the hydraulic cable went, and they've got stabilizers on it now too. That was a problem. The early ones, they didn't have the stabilizer on it where it kind of wanted to really tilt the truck, and tipped them not over, but it would actually be a lot hard on the frame. So they started putting stabilizers on it. But you can see the length of the hydraulic hoses. And I'll tell you what, these guys that use these, they really got handy with the cable jammers. And when they went out in the woods or loading or unloading, just like you do when you're fishing for trout or whatever, and you cast your line out there, they would cast the bucket out there with it open, and there's a bundle of logs out there or wood out there. They grab it and drag it back to the truck and load it, and it reels fast, So they like that early design. Here's his first shop, in his first machine shop, and his first crew of guys that he had working there. Now you can kind of see this lathe that he had, because he doesn't have a line shaft in the second plant. They would take and retrofit and add a transmission up there with a shifter lever on it with a belt drive here, and they were able to speed it up or slow it down, just by shifting transmission. And it worked very well. And this, he installed some of these on trailers too. A lot of the guys wanted it on a trailer, for bigger loads back in the day. Now this is his second shop again, and this gentleman here, Velasing, he worked with my father for many years, and he would actually go all over the United States demonstrate. He'd take this truck here with extra loaders on and demonstrating the cable jammer and the hydraulics, and he actually would sell those and come back empty and load up and go out with another load. So he did a lot of promoting before we had dealers around the United States, and he did set up dealers too as time went on. This is one of my dad's brothers now. That worked out good too. His brothers were all in logging, his brother-in-laws were in logging. And so anytime he needed to test a machine, he'd always make sure that these guys had a loader, and they would let him know the good points and the bad points, and they helped him a lot with the designs and help him make it more rugged and logging. Now that's a pretty good size load too, for single axle in 6-cylinder trucks. This gentleman from Glidden over here too, he had tandem internationals, but you can see the bundle of wood, and it was very efficient loading wood that way. I think this one's over by eastern Wisconsin, and he loaded a lot of wood on gondola cars. The Mahalcos over there in Crandon, they were really good Prentice customers over the years. They hauled a lot of wood, but you can see the load of wood, and now they go with a pup trailer too. And he had that long boom on there, so you could load front to back. And it was just amazing how these guys were able to load that truck up. Here's another. His 2 loaders right here. One up front here and another one in the back. But that's a lot of pulpwood moving in and out of there. With it sure speeded up the operation, I'll tell you. Here's a tandem now getting involved in more and more newer trucks now, and trucks were starting to get heavier duty as time went on, compared to the back in the 50s and 60s. Now this is his first knuckle boom loader that he built, and it was a back end of a little John Deere. And it wasn't, if you notice, you probably can hardly see it, but he just experimenting with it. So he didn't have a full length of pipe. He just actually welded that extra extension on once they figured out the right linkage. From the cylinder down below for lifting, and of course the cylinder on top to move the stick boom out. But that's actually was his first prototype for the hydraulic knuckle boom. And you can kind of see the same thing again. This is his second shop. There's one of the cable hydraulic machines there. Now this is his first all hydraulic. But that little skidder, I'll tell you, that skidding trailer that he built, they sold a lot of those TMS machines with stabilizers on it too, and then anybody could use it with any of their tractors or cats, and with all the hydraulics were all here set up for them, and they coupled onto the hydraulics off the truck, and they were very, very efficient to be able to move on a lot of heavy logs that they were able to handle. Now this is the third plant now in the 60s. And it was located just kind of south of the village of Prentice. With another creamery. All these buildings were actually creameries. And this one had, I think Ladysmith Milk Producer had this one originally. But you can see some of his loaders now sitting over here, hydraulic ones. And this is a skidder here, but that'll give him a lot more room, square footage, to be able to manufacture. And this was his first employee. When he started in the 50s, he worked the whole time until he retired. He stayed with the company for, I think it was about 40 years. This is his first, on his third manufacturing plant, but that was his machine shop. And he got a lot more automated machines now in this third plant compared to what he had when he first started. Multiple machines, milling machines and engine lathes and turret lathes, and because they were making their hydraulic cylinders, and they're doing a lot of their own manufacturing in-house. And then his advertisement, his literature that went out, you can't see the number there, but I always remember that phone number in Prentice at that time was number 7. A lot of people would call 7 what, they'd go, but at that, it was, again, like anything else, the phone systems now, we've got lots of numbers, but back in the day, they all had operators, and it was a telephone exchange in the village. So a lot of people knew everything that was going on. This is his engineering office upstairs in that third plant. He had a lot of draftsmen and engineers that worked on, because they get a lot of calls, from all over the United States. They had loaders working all over for custom applications. And so they had to draw up, and send quotes and quotations out to be able to accommodate the customer. In the beginning of the spindle or the turntable, when he got into those knuckle boom loaders, these guys were always, no matter what you build, it wasn't heavy enough, so you beef it up, but they were breaking the spindles off in the beginning. And they went to what's called drop forging, and they come in there, and once they started doing the drop forging, they really changed the strength of the machine, and never had a fracture or crack problem after that. But I was amazed that drop forging made that big a difference, but it proved itself very well over a period of time. Here's a kind of a knuckle boom, but loading this guy. This is his other truck. This is what he first used right here, and he bought one of these, and that really helped him out, with his loading logging operation. My dad was always involved in community projects. This happens to be the school's yard. There was a gravel pit back there, and he wanted to test his machines out. He himself would always go run it just to see if he could make it better, what else he had needed to do. That's an old Studebaker. And he used that a lot, but there was a lot of boulders there, so he was wrestling them around, but he was also helping the school clean up that it ended up to be they'll fill the gravel pit in. It got to be a football field, the track, and a small Little League diamond, and they've used that to this day. This gentleman from Ogama was a real good Prentice customer also. He had twin trucks, and he also ended up with pup trailers behind. So this boy, I mean, he loaded and hauled a lot of wood. Now take a look at that load. I'm sure he's into V8s now for trucks. The Internationals are real beefy trucks in the day. This Oshkosh with tree length, 4-wheel drive. But that guys got creative with the loaders, I'll tell you, and the trucks to make it so they could get that wood out. This is a sawmill, I believe, in Neopet in the Indian Reservation, if I remember right. But they started making a lot of stationary installations for mills using that same knuckle boom hydraulic design. J.P. Schmidt in Tomahawk, he was another excellent Prentice loader customer. He bought a lot of machines over the years. He was using pulpwood pup trailers and with rear mount loaders. And this the gentleman from Michigan, Amasa, Michigan, he also was a real good Prentice customer. But that FWE was quite the truck, all-wheel drive there and front-wheel drive, and with that pup trailer. I mean, that was a brute or a beast of a truck. Well, then, like I said before, he had a lot of calls for applications, whether it would be cable jammer or was the knuckle boom loader. And he ended up had calls for block loaders, for cement block loaders or burial vaults or for septic tanks, or it was amazing, and of course they had to come up with a special design grapple to take a pallet of, but they sold a lot of them. This customer here in Florida, when the salesman went down there, Mr. Osling went down there, he said they told him to stop up at the northern plant. They had quite a few plants down in Florida and do a demo there. He did the demo up there, and the guy says, come on down don't bother doing any more demos down here. And he gave them an order for 20 of them. And they all put on 6x6, but they came up to Prentice. They were delivered and made in Wisconsin, and they brought them to the plant because they're going to Florida. There was no heaters in them. There was no antifreeze in them, and we had to scramble trying to find places to put them inside the plant. And then as soon as they were done with the loader on them, they flew a guy up here and they drove that thing back down to Florida. Top speeds 45 miles an hour. That had to be a long trip. And then here's some more of them that they built but now of course you can see there's a special grapple that goes on for blocks that they put on. And that was one of our demonstrators that we used at the plant. But it was our first brand new truck for a demonstrator. Otherwise, we had all used trucks for the first demonstrators. They got into drywall too, and sheetrock, for loading, and it worked really well for putting material up through windows. In the beginning, they were having a little rust problem with it was just all steel on steel. But then Dad figured out using that Teflon was that come out at that time, and he bolted Teflon each slide so they would slide off real easy for the sheetrock. And of course, the grapples, we start putting buckets on them too, for loading materials out of a car or whatever application they wanted to do. But they worked really well. This gentleman, Eggert Lyman Medford, did a lot of that. Cranberry harvesting, they built special applications for that also. And you can see the mechanism up here that had to be able to dump hydraulically, be able to dump out the side. Then they started making a folding boom too that would fold up behind the truck. But that worked really well, for construction guys, for loading tires and different applications, for a smaller truck. Down in Florida, then off of the Liberty ships there for retrieving the nose from the Columbia program, they were able to put Prentice loaders on these ships, and they would retrieve this out of the ocean. They actually did also the solid fuel rockets they would pull out. You can see here now is another Prentice loader doing the same thing. And they did a nice job working that for many years. I think they built a lot of them too, because it was the seawater. They had to use a lot of stainless steel on the unloader when they built them. Now, my dad had two plants, and he added on in the 60s I think 5 times, plus the paint shop. Then they built the offices across the road. This is the original plant, the original creamery building. And then he added the engineering over here and then the plant back here. And this is the offices on this side and the original building. And then he added back there. And then they added a paint shop. But they had about 400 guys working for him at 3 shifts and also. And in the Air Force, they actually bought quite a few loaders too over the years. They would use them for airport plowing and clearing and sand and that type of thing, for their application. Well, then in the 70s, he sold, was actually, I think 69, 70, he sold the company to Oregon saw chain people and what called Omark Industries. But my dad had a 5-year contract, and they needed a facility to do research work because the other facilities were full. So this is the old Dodge Chrysler Plymouth dealer in Prentice. They converted that to a R&D shop. The machine shop was all set up in here, and they did special projects here. And then when Omark took control of everything over there, they built a brand new research and development facility over here, and that's where my dad would work after they moved out of this one. This is the inside of the 3rd manufacturing plant. They had big boring bars and overhead cranes, the 50-ton cranes. They were building such big machinery, and they were able to move that stuff around with those big overhead cranes. These 600, they were building bigger and bigger machines all the time. Now they're doing heel boom stuff. This one happened to be in Texas, and these truck trailers, these V8s with tandems with tandem trailers, heel booming the logs on there. This gentleman up here in Maine, northern Maine, the loads, they were on their own company roads, so the loads were 12, 14 foot wide, I think 25 feet high. And of course, they had to stay off any major highway, but they loaded it over the top of the cab like that, heel booming. But I hope they never have to hit a moose up there. I said, look at that load that would come down on that cab, but they had somewhat protected there, but they sold a lot of those loaders up there. There was a company up there, Pelletiers. They actually had a TV show later on, and they were all Prentice loader customers too. And they had trucks there that were hauling double trailers loaded up with these huge trucks in Prentice loaders. In fact, this is a Pelletier truck right here later on with a loader, and I think there's a picture of that with a double load, but they were 400,000 pound loads. I think it was Wisconsin's an 80,000 pound, but with the triple axle trailer and then triple axle and then another axle in between her and truck, they were able to pull 400,000 pound loads of wood. Pretty good size, pretty beefy truck. On this manufacturing plant and is the setup here now. You can kind of see after they added the paint facility on it, but now you got a little bit better shot of the plant inside. They built a lot of their own fixtures and jigs, for different applications. Now here was a rotator that they actually would turn the frame as they welded it. They were able to rotate it and do their boring work and their lathes, but they really were able to stay on top of it. And again, they had their own water tower, because at that time the village water tower wasn't big enough. They had to put their own tower up, but they had to heat it also. Then the village put another big 500,000 or 250,000 gallon tower up, and they were able to take it back down again because they were on city water supply for its flowing. They did load a lot of machines out of Prentice on the rail. These I think were going to Canada, but then these are fruit loaders that were going over to to California. They had special fruit boxes that these were designed. They pulled behind a tractor and then they would load them up and then straddle that trailer in between there. Then out west again. Now this is an 810. It's got triple cylinders underneath, twins up. It's a huge heel boom lift, but it was all for out west logging. And I'll tell you, that really put the loader through its paces. That heel boom logging put a lot of leverage on the machine, but they worked very, very well out west, and they sold a lot of machines out west. And he also got involved they were on a lot of times around barges, for applications around the country. They were all in all 50 states now, Prentice loaders, and actually worldwide too. I remember people from Chile, and they would come up to Prentice, and look at the factory and look at the loaders, and then we'd ship units over there. There's another electric stationary mount in a mill yard. Well, my dad then, he actually used the airplane a lot for his own business. He started off with a single engine. He built the runway in Prentice for himself, grass runway with a Stinson Voyager that he used. He picked up parts and brought parts out and flew customers in and whatever. And the grass runway then was in 200 acres. The village decided that, let's build a green alongside of it, and another green. Pretty soon it was a 9-hole golf course with the grass runway. But the FAA had a little fit about it because airplanes would circle around and the people would get off the runway, they'd land and go back to golfing. So then they built a brand new all-weather blacktop runway then in a new industrial park later on. He got this from the Northeast Loggers in the award out there back, I think it was in '96 for the work and dedication, for the timber industry. They had a celebration for my dad and Prentice called Prentice Progress Days, and they had to give him a plaque and stuff telling the history of the Prentice loaders and what he had done for the community over the years. And then there was a scholarship set up. That was my mom accepting it from my dad, who passed away by then, and this is a school administrator. There was a gentleman in Prentice that had worked for my father and worked and retired actually with my father, and then when it worked for Omark and the companies after, but he had a custom mailbox built for his house. It's still in Prentice today, but it's really quite cool the way he did that. Of course, then down the road, then they come up with the newer design loaders. This was in the time of Omark Industries in Blount. This one here is called a 2124. And you see a lot of them around the United States. And I've got a friend that moved from Tennessee up here, and his brother lived in Florida, and they see a lot of these 2124s down south. No, this is, excuse me. Wow, touchy. The 2520 harvester. They built some of those, and now we see Caterpillar is getting involved in the Prentice line. 2007, Caterpillar bought the Prentice operation, and they started doing a lot more real specialized pieces of machinery. And this is a Prentice skidder. They built those also. It's a nice looking machine. It did a nice job. Here the Logging Congress, they actually had a patent on that, and they used it all over the United States logging shows. But they was a time event where they would bring the blocks. They start you here by o'clock and take the white blocks and bring them over the squares over here, and then you had to reverse it and bring them back over there. And they did a lot of that around the United States, and they had trophies and prize money for any logger that wanted to compete. And boys, I'll tell you what, some of these guys were really, really good at it. If you look in the background there, you can kind of see one of the cable jammers. That was the old number 4 loader that my dad had built. They went and found it up in Michigan. And one of the employees that worked for my dad all his life, he actually took it upon himself to restore it, because he knew exactly how it worked, because he built the original one. And they found a little Chevy chassis for the loader. And they painted it out, sanded it down, painted it all up, put all the hydraulics back, corrected everything out, and it's still working to this day. In fact, the new company that bought the Prentice plant has got still that machine is sitting inside the lunchroom meeting room area with the history of the Prentice loaders in there. So if you ever get the Prentice and if you want to see it, it's mounted inside the building in Prentice. This is my father, and he passed away in 99. And a lot of people say they look at this picture and they said it looks like Vince Lombardi. Now you can see the application of the Cat Prentice. They bought the line and they wanted to absorb it eventually into Cat, but when they first went out promoting, the Cat dealer out in West, they had a district rep go and visit them and told them that they're coming out with a loader. And the dealer says, about time Caterpillar come out with a loader to compete with the Prentice. Well, you can see they're coming out the same door, different serial plates on them, black and orange, or black and yellow, or black and orange. But they're identical machines. The parts all interchanged, but that's how they absorbed the Prentice name. Well, he had about 250,000 square feet there, and they did a lot of service parts. The R&D unit, they tested the machines before they were shipped anywhere, but they had a worldwide parts distribution center in Prentice. And then when Omark, when they bought the company out, they split the plant. They put part of it down south in Zebulon, North Carolina. And then, but they kept expanding here in Prentice. You can see the additions on there compared to what it was when I first showed you. And if you look in the background here too, this is a real high-tech sawmill that was built in the 80s in Prentice, called a Beaver sawmill. They got 2 railroad spurs. They're in there. They have 3 kilns for kiln drying the lumber. The building, there was a log every 3 seconds. There's 100 trucks a day feeding that to this day, feeding logs, and it's all red pine. And then back here is a treating facility. They treat the logs or the lumber, and they ship out treated or untreated, and then railroad cars come in and bring untreated, and they treat it and send it back out. But they had this spur here would take out the chips, and then they have a lot of bark that they burn in their incinerator to heat the buildings and dry kiln. This guy here, I got to have my hats off to him. He travels all over for natural disasters in America. And he was a Prentice loader customer, and he was a Cat customer. And he goes to hurricanes, he goes to floods or tornadoes and disaster areas with these trucks and this trailer. And his services are all from what I understand now, because what he does, I think Cat supplies him with the loader, and Zed Peterbilt supplies him with a truck. But he volunteers his time and his people to just go out in natural disasters. It's nice to see people do that kind of thing in America. This is my mom at the 50th anniversary. They had all kinds of models on display there, and you can see the old number 4 back there. And then behind there is the research, as the R&D shop, and they built all the custom product, but the offices are on the left. The plant is on this side, on the this side of the road over here. But they put on quite a thing for dealers, and it brought them in from all over the United States to take a look at the product line. The county fairgrounds up in Park Falls, or Phillips, I mean, they have a nice 2 big metal buildings with a lot of agricultural machinery in there, but they didn't have anything really for logging. And so what I did was I found another jammer up in Michigan, and the gentleman was on a rock pile, actually. He said, this is your dad's jammer, and I bought it from him in the 40s. It should be in Prentice. You should really have that, he said. In fact, I'm going to give it to you, he said. So I went up there and we brought it back. I had it sandblasted. We set it all up on I couldn't fit it in the truck in the building, so I just cut the frame, and this is a big GMC rear end here, and I mounted it on there and showed what the cutaway of the Model A rear end, and so they've got it mounted up there. But you can see a little set of tongs hanging there, but it shows the principle of it, and it was a nice way of offering logging equipment in the fairground, because they do that, and they had a nice display of agricultural, but this kind of added to it, to the display. Well, that just gives you a little bit of idea what it's all about. I can answer any questions you may have. I tried to move through this pretty fast. Maybe I went too fast. We can go back to some. If somebody's got a question, they want to see something over again, I'd be glad to show it to you. And with that, I would like to turn it over to the people that are running the show.
So thank you, Dale. This is Tom Giroux. I'll be helping with the Q&A here. So we have a couple of comments already, mostly complimentary comments, but I think you kind of mentioned this, but Mary asked if there's a museum about this, and you mentioned that there was a section of the museum in one of the towns there. Could you go over that?
Yeah, the only one that I know of that's actually got an actual loader it's at the Price County Fairgrounds, and every summer they have the fairgrounds open, and you also part of the Antique Association of Price County, they'll give private tours if you want to request it. But there's I've actually tried to check around. One time Hayward was trying to put a museum together for logging machinery, and it never came about. And I'm hoping, because there's a big logging area up at Hayward, and I was hoping that I'd be able to find a place there, because I actually have another truck, a GMC with another 40s vintage loader on it in the warehouse that I want to be able to get it to some museum somewhere so it stays inside. What's inside now, but I only bring it out during progress days to show people what it was all about. But I think that this something, even out west, I've tried to check around the United States. They've got a lot of agricultural machinery museums. They've got a lot of logging truck type museum, or tractor type museum, bulldozer types, construction museums. But does anybody knows anything about any type of forestry logging equipment type museums around the United States? I haven't found one yet, but maybe they're out there somewhere. But I'd appreciate any feedback on that. And because I've got a lot of history right now. I've been supplying the Wisconsin Forest History Association of Wisconsin. There's a lot of history books that I'm trying to put together, videos and slides. And pictures, photographs of the early Prentice line. I'm donating that, and I'm also doing all to the museums that you mentioned at the beginning, the Knox Creek Heritage Center, the Jump River Valley one, the Price County Museum, and up at the Great Lakes Northern Research Center up at Ashland has all of Price County's records, and they've taken a lot of the material and they're putting it inside. They got an air-conditioned facility. In fact, anybody who's a Wisconsin taxpayer, that's a beautiful, beautiful facility, $7.5 million. If you ever want to see a lot of history about the Great Lakes and things that up there, they've done such a nice job. It's a nice tour and a nice place to visit. But I'm sending some of that stuff up there. But even the Smithsonian, there's a girl there that works in the Smithsonian from Minnesota. She's well aware of logging up there, and so we've been conversing back and forth. She would like some material also for there, but I just don't know of any actual size logging equipment that I'm aware of. I think there's some outside out west, if I remember right. There was a gentleman that had a lot of logging stuff outside, but you know what it's like. If it sits outside for a while, it's got to be inside. Otherwise, it doesn't look good.
Correct. Is the plant in Prentice still operating?
Oh, yes. The gentleman that, when Caterpillar bought it in 2007, they had a lot of machinery that they produced out of Prentice, and they shipped. But what happened is, and anybody knows Caterpillar, they are really, really worldwide in heavy rock and dirt equipment. The forestry thing, in my opinion, did not lend itself real well to their dealers. Their dealers are all pretty much all rock and dirt, backhoes and excavators, bulldozers, front end loaders, and you find very few dealers that handle a lot of forestry equipment. So what they did was they decided to get out of forestry, and the gentleman that bought the Prentice plant, who was building the Cat and Prentice loaders, and he would manufacture those, and as a contract manufacturer, like I said, Cat's got a real heavy overhead, and they go to contract manufacturers to build stuff for them, and he was building them over there. Well, he wanted to continue building the Prentice loader when Cat decided that they were going to get out of forestry, and Cat would not sell it to them because he knew that this guy was going to continue building the Prentice loader, and Caterpillar wants to absorb the Prentice name into the Cat name. They didn't want to have Prentice name out there anymore. That's kind of how the big companies work, I guess. So anyway, there's another company called Weiler in Iowa, and he was competing for that contract work with Caterpillar, and he actually built a blacktop machinery for Caterpillar. And so he was building the same thing. He was building a blacktop machinery and his own Weiler blacktop machinery. So he ended up with that line, the Prentice Cat line, because he must have had an agreement with them that he will not manufacture the Prentice loader. He will just manufacture Cat. So yes, they are still manufacturing the Cat stuff in Prentice, but they also have a big plant in LaGrange, Georgia. That's where the big stuff is built for Caterpillar, and they built sections in certain parts in Prentice. But the gentleman that bought the Cat plant in the Prentice, he's got 7 plants in Minnesota, and he gets into custom manufacturing for anybody. Right now, he was building anybody heard of? There's a Chinese company called Legong, and Trump's tariffs forced them to manufacture in the States. And so he took that job, and he was assembling and making these excavators in Prentice. And that contract came up, and now he's building stuff for India, railroad machines for India. And then he did purchase a company for ready mix drums out of the Prentice plant that they're manufacturing the whole drum roller for ready mix trucks. He's building those in Prentice, but he just put in a great big flame cutting machine or laser machine, and he's got a nice facility there with these 50-ton cranes. So he's not afraid to tie into projects, I'll tell you. And so they're still manufacturing there under different circumstances, but it's just too bad that the Prentice name has to disappear because of their decision, So, but it's 75 years. I mean, they were still making loaders 70, 75 years later. So,
this is my question. It seems like the early versions of this were pretty rudimentary, similar to a jammer.
Yes.
And probably had lots of inherent safety issues. And I'm just wondering, how the company addressed a lot of those safety issues over the year and improve it. And I imagine just
You're talking about like product liability, that type of thing, you mean?
No, just the operating of the machinery.
Well, I know. My father, as many years as he built from 1945 to when he sold it to around 1969, 70, zero lawsuits, never had one lawsuit. And of course, if you remember right, there was no advertising for product liability till about the 70s. It started, 70, 75. That's when they were starting to advertise, in fact, after he sold the plant to Omark and to Blount, they dealt with some product liability suits after that. Most of the time is a guy would leave the boom up and he'd hit a bridge, stuff that was not their fault, but how do you make it foolproof? No matter what you do nowadays, or somebody would swing like those great big turntable loaders. They'd swing a big log or a boom, and it would end up hitting somebody. There was, I'm sure there was certain things, but but it was amazing that he never had anything all the years that he worked and built equipment. Yeah. And of course, they didn't have the guards or protection on those early cable jammers you're talking about. They were much more open. And I know even like the Cat loaders with the jammers on them, with those winches on there too, guys had to be careful when they drug logs up to a pile or put them on a truck or on a dray or a skid, that they had to make sure that they did it carefully so that a big bundle of wood didn't swing and hit them or something like that.
But even just moving from the cable-driven systems to the hydraulics must have been a big safety improvement.
Absolutely. Yes, there's no doubt about it. Absolutely. And of course, the only thing that I always remember is that, because I remember people even around here, if they had too big a load of wood and they knuckled up that boom and they left it humped up in the air, and if they didn't take the time to measure how high that boom was up over their load, once in a while there'd be a string of wires hanging on their truck trailer they pulled on as they're going down the highway. But once in a while, even today, I mean, I don't care if you haul an excavator on it, if you don't knuckle that boom down, close to the semi trailer, the flatbed, you'll hit a bridge, and they hit bridges, and if they let them up too high, so. But as far as the overall reliability of the machines, other than that, I was telling you about the turntable spindles, they were cracking, and luckily they were able to come up with that forging, that some salesman showed them that there's a better way of doing that if you're having a spindle problem, and we can do a drop forging on it, and that totally cured that problem, so. And that stabilizer, having hydraulic stabilizers, was a big plus too for the loader.
Oh, sure.
Not tipping over.
Not tipping over, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Even just having the foot controls in the seat was, probably safer for the operator.
Oh yes. Yeah. And if you look at the machines today too, the electronics that are on the machines, because I know like those block loaders that you saw, they had a remote control that would plug into the loader, so the guy didn't have to be up on the loader, and he would actually have buttons down below, but it was all by electrical cable, so that was the way they operated it. But of course, later on now they come up with those remote controlled radio control type boxes, so. But
so I think we've covered just about all the questions, and Don will come on here for a minute at the end also, but wanted to thank you. There were lots and lots of compliments in the chat box about the program.
Thank you.
People were wondering already if this is being recorded, and of course it is being recorded and will be available on the Forest History Association's YouTube channel sometime tomorrow. So okay. Don, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that next month we have Jerry Apps coming to speak on When the White Pine Was King. It's his recent book. Jerry's a real popular speaker. The registration will be going up online in the next couple of days. But just so you know that the presentation will be April 20th, and I hope that if you're enjoying these Forest History Association webinars, that you can join us also for that one. I also want to say before we end for tonight, a special thanks to Dale for the presentation. It was excellent, and I couldn't have expected anything less. So thank you very much, Dale.
Thank you. Thank you for the
regarding the question again, all webinars, Forest History Association webinars are recorded, and then they are placed on our Forest History Association website and on our YouTube channel. And so they can be easily watched at any time. And with that, thank you all for attending.
How do they search those? By a name?
If you just search for Forest History Association of Wisconsin, it will pull up our website. And that's probably the easiest place to get to it. Underneath collections is a listing of all the webinars that we presented by year, and people can click on it and access it that way.
Yeah, I enjoy your publication. Like I said, I've saved all the issues from when I joined, so you guys do a good job with a lot of data, a lot of research, and it's a lot of being able. I got friends over here that come over and look at the stuff. You go back to a lot of good things in Wisconsin.
Oh, thank you very much. And as long as you bring that up, if anyone is interested in becoming a member of the Forest History Association, you can also go to the website under Forest History Association. WI is the WI.com, and there's a spot there for becoming a member if you'd like. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Yep.
Good night.